It's time to move on to nouns. Nouns to me are always the secondary elements of a clause. The primary the center, right, is the verb. Um, let's talk about nouns. I'm going to define them in a very sort of abstract way that will make sense as you watch the rest of the videos. But nouns are subjects, complements, objects. All right, that's it. Um, and if we just keep it that way, well, obviously that definition depends on other definitions. What's a subject? What's an object? And what's a complement? However, we'll get to those definitions later. And that really allows a lot of different types of words to be considered nouns with the way I'm developing this toolbox, if you will, of, of tools for us to analyze deep grammar. It's at this point right here where I start deviating from other grammarians, and there are more than one or two places where the traditional grammarian, the purist, if you will, or even just the conventional grammarian may say, well, that's wrong. That word can never be a noun, or that word can never be an adjective. And I'll be like, well, I've seen it used this way, and if we just use the terms broadly in this sense, we can streamline the teaching of grammar. So I have no trouble calling something a noun that other people would say, well, that can never be a noun. Well, anyway, nouns are subjects, objects, and complements. All right. Um, there are some things, though, that if the word used in the clause is actually a noun, um, they may have some things attached to them that would allow you to easily recognize them as nouns. Okay. For example, any word that has an article in front of it is going to be a noun, right? Now, that's really the function of an article, is literally to come before a noun. Articles are extremely interesting little words that run around in all languages, and um, they appear to be very simple and one dimensional on the surface, but then you dive in and you realize, oh, what's really going on here? How is this functioning? And it gets a little has some depth to it. But anyway, the point is, we're all familiar with these. Okay, English has three: um, a, an, and the. So a book, the book. An is a version of a. It's we put in the end n to have a consonant sound if the following word begins with a vowel, right? So we don't go a eclair, if you're talking about an eclair, or um, a object if you're talking about an object, right? So now I do hear it sometimes just used as a object, um, but I would say it should be an, right? So a and an are really the same, and then the. Now we have aspect here, okay? That's why I love to consider aspect not just connected to the verb, but you can apply to many things. When you start making nuances, and those nuances have a grammatical formations of their own, the aspect here would be, the being the definite article, all right? That's how we treat it in English, right? The book as opposed to a book, right? When you hear someone talking about the X, Y, or Z, they're being very specific about something versus any old X, Y, or Z. Just pick an X, Y, or Z. So we have the definite article, the, and the indefinite, the a or the an. So whenever you see a word, I just said it right there, right? A word, right? Boom. The word there is a noun because it's being preceded immediately by an article. It's as simple as that, right? So you can just hunt for the articles. Whatever comes next is going to be a noun. Also plurality. Like only nouns can carry plurality, nouns and pronouns, in the sense of the singular form of the, well, that's tricky, isn't it? Because as I'm saying that, verbs have plurality as well. But I'm talking about just being able to count the thing. If you know that you have box and boxes. By the way, the S for the plural that we use in English is a leftover of the heavily inflected version of English that used to be at play. But any words that have plurality uh, Nouns carry plurality, so that might be a signal too. But the fact of the matter is, it's much better not to use these sorts of things to discover nouns. It's much better to look at a collection of words, say where are the clauses? To find the clauses, I need to find the main verbs. What are the subjects of the main verbs? What are the objects? What are the indirect objects? What are the objects of the preposition? What are the complements? And as soon as you find those things, all starting with the main verb and asking the right sort of questions, you'll naturally find the nouns. So, um, perhaps we don't really need to worry so much about the articles and the plurality notion. I did want to mention articles though because they're important to foreign language learning, or uh, they appear in almost all the languages, to my knowledge. That's kind of a very obnoxious statement because I don't know all the languages, but I've yet to run across a language that just doesn't use articles. So you're going to have to learn the articles for the foreign language that you are learning, right? Just know that they are uh, always their function is to precede and introduce a noun in the clause, but they carry more information, right? They can carry information like the determinate or the indeterminate, right? The the specificity of the thing, the book versus the indefinite nature of just a book, right? Um, Now they can also carry information about gender, right? Um, English doesn't really use gender except for concepts that, in words, except for concepts that are just clearly gender related, like women and man. Well, obviously those words have gender. We can see that, but they have gender because they are connected to, you know, elements of reality that themselves have gender, right? But see, the articles in English don't have gender. However, articles in other languages may very well display gender, right? So you might have a whole set of masculine articles, and then you have to memorize a whole set of feminine articles, because the noun that follows is feminine. Now, I would strongly suggest that you don't look too deeply into the notion of gender to see just why certain nouns have the gender they have in other languages. Um, I'm sitting in a chair right now, and in Spanish the word for chair is silla, Silla, and it's a feminine noun. So if I wanted to precede it with an article, I'd have to say la silla. Um, and I have no idea why chair is considered a feminine noun in Spanish. Same with table. Mesa is table, Mesa, and it's female. So, you know, I'm going to have to say la mesa. Car is carro, and it ends in an O, and it's masculine in Spanish, and so I'm going to have to say el carro. La mesa, el carro. Okay, but sometimes the rules get a little flip flop because you can't just say any noun in Spanish that ends with an A is feminine. It seems like many do, but you have many exceptions. Dia being one of the biggest. Dia is day, and it's masculine. El dia. So, yeah, plenty of languages have articles that carry information, not just the definite and indefinite natures of this, but also um, information about the words gender. They can also carry information about the plurality of the noun, right? If we're going to talk about, the silla, and we're talking about one, it's la silla. If we're talking about more than one, it's sillas in Spanish, and it's las sillas. If we're talking about more than one car, it's los carros, right? El carro, los carros. So, el and los very clearly, carry the information of masculinity and plurality. Well, el is singular, but number, gender and number. Okay, so that's one thing that nouns are going to carry. Nouns can carry information about gender and number. For English, the gender is very muted, but for many current modern foreign languages and also ancient languages, gender was a huge thing. So as you go when you study the vocabulary to have the basic diction to play with the language to learn it, you're going to have some sort of vocabulary, whether it's at least 50 words or more. It should be around 500 words, but anyway, to learn a foreign language, to at least get to a reading level, it needs to be more than that. And anyway, the point is, you're probably going to have to learn quite a few forms of the articles. Okay, so buckle down. This is where memory comes into play. Many. One thing I'm not doing here in these video series is actually drawing charts out for you, because I would be like, your book is doing that for you, I'm sure. These come in charts. They come in paradigm charts. Declensions, conjunctions. We'll talk about those later. You can just see them arranged by number and person, and you can just see that box chart and memorize. The table. See the table and just memorize the table. So, all right, we're going to move on, but just remember, articles are very important. They carry information as well, and depending on the foreign language you're learning, you might have to learn upwards to 30 or 40 versions of articles. So a lot of memory work. Prepare yourself for that.